Hi, I'm Matt Pratten. I'm the Senior Regional Analyst for Europe here at Intelligence Fusion. And in this video, I'd just like to provide just a quick update on what we've been monitoring with and reporting on with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and also provide an assessment on what we perceive Russia's endgame is from all of this. The date and time of this briefing is 16th of March 2022 as at 13:59 hours GMT. And the latest date of information we have for this briefing is 16th of March 2022 as of 11:30 hours GMT. So just to provide a quick overview of what we can continue to monitor and report on with regards to Russia's invasion of Ukraine is, first of all, the Ukrainians continue to inflict heavy losses on Russian forces in direct engagements, as shown, as you can see on the platform here. We come across various skirmishes, movements of infantry, armor, IFVs, and in many of these cases, the Ukrainians have a significant advantage in both, in essentially tactics, techniques, and procedures. Now, this has been occurring for 3 weeks as of today. And essentially what has happened in this case is that it continues to show that the Russians, in their planning for this invasion, completely underestimated the Ukrainians' will to fight. However, despite this hubris, the Russians are winning the war, as they continue to have significant advantages in both the air and also with artillery. As we can see here with numerous indirect weapon incidents we log. The Russians have a lot of advantages with multiple barrel rocket launchers, artillery, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles, with strikes occurring on almost a daily basis. Among the most recent was the successful targeting of the Dnipro airport in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. It was two missiles essentially took out the entire runway. In addition to the artillery advantages they have, is also their strength in the air, with ongoing incidents of airstrikes across the country. And among the most recent airstrikes was the one in Yavorov in Lviv Oblast, which saw up to 35 people killed and an additional 134 wounded. Alongside the advantages that the Russians have in the air and also with artillery is growing control over Ukraine's infrastructure, particularly with their ongoing control of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, which on a few occasions they've managed to actually cut the power on a number of occasions. And this also appears to be occurring elsewhere around the country, with incidents of blackouts and gas outages noted either deliberately being cut, or as a instance of collateral damage from various air and artillery strikes. However, despite what we see with regards to all this going on, there's a number of contextual factors to be considered when it comes to trying to figure out what the end game is here. And there's a few details which need to be pointed out. Probably among the most significant was just prior to this invasion occurring, President Vladimir Putin delivered a televised speech where he mentioned the following, and I quote, "Modern Ukraine was entirely and completely created by Russia, more precisely, Bolshevik Communist Russia. This process began almost immediately after the revolution of 1917. Now, there were several other claims made by President Putin in this speech, and despite a lot of inaccuracies in his claims, it provides insight into what President Putin's and the Russian government's intent is for its invasion of Ukraine. Is essentially, President Putin appears to see Ukraine as Russian territory, and this invasion as merely taking back what is rightfully Russia's. But with this kind of claim, there's actually some additional considerations that need to be pointed out as to why Ukraine would be seen in this manner. And we've come across it in previous reports we've posted. As you can see here on with this image on the screen here, this is an overview of what we understand with regards to Ukraine's economic significance. In the east of the country there, stretching essentially through most of Donetsk, Luhansk, Kharkov, Sumy, and even Chernihiv Oblast, and also stretching into Russia, is the Dnipro-Donetsk oil and gas basin, and this provides significant amounts of natural resources. Furthermore, you've got the importance of the Crimean Peninsula, which not only provides access to and essentially control of the Black Sea, but just off to the west coast of the Crimea Peninsula is also another major oil and gas basin. Another factor which needs to be brought into consideration is also the Dnieper River, which, as you can see on the image here, essentially cuts Ukraine in half, stretching from the Black Sea and proceeding north, even cutting Kiev in half and ending at the Belarus border. Another major factor to consider as well is Russian military doctrine. With a lot of the engagements we're seeing, it shows a continuation of what they've developed from lessons learned in Georgia as well as Chechnya. Is the Russian military serves to provide a means to achieve a political end for the Russian government. Specifically, its role is to inflict chaos, destruction, and unrest on an enemy, to the point where said enemy simply agrees to Russia's terms just for the sake of ending hostilities. To provide a very blunt summary of it, it is essentially a form of attrition warfare with an upgrade. And finally, and amongst a lot of reports mentioned about Russia's terms towards Ukraine, it's included the recognition of eastern Ukraine's Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts, as well as Crimea, as being independent territories. Essentially, Donetsk, we've got Donetsk here, Luhansk here on the platform, and then down to the south we've got Crimea. However, this would, if Ukraine were to agree to these terms, this would mean essentially redrawing Ukraine's borders completely. And considering that, with what's been going on with regards to Ukraine's ability to inflict heavy losses on Russian forces, this may not be enough anymore. Now, with all of that in mind, here's what current assessments lead us to believe at the moment: is given the aim of the use of force by the Russian military, this invasion of Ukraine is going to continue until Ukraine agrees to Russian terms. And considering President Putin's speech before the invasion, this is going to mean giving up territory to the Russians. Now, in this regard, there's a number of ways this could actually pan out, considering recent developments. There's about 3 scenarios we're considering at the moment. Scenario 1 is where Russia demands Luhansk, Donetsk, and Crimea are recognised as either independent territories or are given over to Russia's control. Now, this kind of demand may actually be a situation that Ukraine could agree to. However, when you consider the amount of losses which have been inflicted on Russian forces by the Ukrainians, it now could be a case where this would be too little for the amount of casualties which have been inflicted. Additionally, when you look at this terrain, while you could easily redraw these borders, trying to actually enforce them in the future may become quite a difficult task. Then there's scenario 2, and based on what we've been monitoring and reporting on, this appears to be the most likely course of action for Russia's demands, is that Russia would demand a redrawing of Ukraine's borders, which would essentially be using the Dnieper River as the new border, with essentially eastern Ukraine coming and the Crimean Peninsula coming under direct Russian control. There's a number of advantages for this. First of all, with using the Dnieper River as the border, that's a much easier border to control and enforce. Furthermore, redrawing the border in this manner would see direct control of the Dnieper-Donetsk basin for Russia, as well as greater access to the Crimean Peninsula and greater control over the oil and gas basin, which is off the coast of Crimea. Additionally, with redrawing the borders this way, is that what would be left of Ukraine would be an effective buffer for a number of NATO countries which currently border Ukraine. And this leads to scenario 3. The most dangerous course of action in this situation is Russian demands become excessively ambitious, and they demand that Ukraine become completely absorbed by Russia. In that scenario, that provides the biggest, I suppose, what you could call biggest amount of treasure for the amount of blood that's been spilled. But there is a number of risks in this situation. While considering that this would see Ukraine come under Russian control completely, what this would also entail is that Russian forces would be on the border of at least 4 NATO countries: Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania. And considering how things have been occurring inside Ukraine, these countries will nonetheless be very concerned about having Russia right on its borders once again. And in fact, all of these countries are former members of the Soviet Union, so there's still memories of what it was like to be under Russian control. In this situation, what you would have here is Russian forces on these borders, and in that case, if there were to be just simply one bit of misunderstanding or an incident involving the use of force, all of these countries will be very keen to demand the enabling of NATO's Article 5, which is the collective defense principle, where an attack on one is an attack on all of them. While these countries would have some difficulty in fighting Russian forces in that case, as the Ukrainians have shown for the past 3 weeks, Russian forces are certainly not as capable as once previously thought. So those are the 3 scenarios we have assessed for the time being based on what we monitor and report on with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. If you'd like to stay up to date with our monitoring and reporting, be sure to click like, share and subscribe on our YouTube channel, and also sign up to our mailing list to keep up to date with weekly reports. Thanks very much for listening.